I think if you are family, husband, wife, family, team, that I think it's very important to believe that family is first. That's first. Your spouse, your children are first. Your work comes second. But I never found that was a conflict because my family was involved in my work. I did a lot of work at home, but you'd go home and do things with the kids and have dinner and whatever. And at 10 o'clock I went to work and worked till 1 or 2 in the morning and then got up at 8. And then I went to work, and when I was at work, I had a wonderful spouse who took care of the home, and I didn't have to worry about home and family while I was at work. Well, how do you have time for family if you got a busy job, whatever that job is? And I really believe you always have time to do what you deem to be important. You've always, when somebody at the university says, we don't have any money to do this, you've always got money to do what you consider to be important. And I feel the same way about mixing family and work. Both of those are important, but if you discipline yourself, you've always got time to do your work well and take care of your family at the same time.
You know, the work-life balance question is one that I don't think is ever gonna go away. It tends to get asked more by women than men, and women are still struggling with how to make that happen. And even though things are changing, I think that the demands that we all have professionally versus the kind of things that we want in terms of our families or our personal lives is going to be a constant struggle for us, and it won't ever go away. I always say that I'd like to take the word balance out of that question because it implies to me that you've got the teeter-totter sitting on a pivot and it's perfectly even there, and that you want to reach some kind of Zen state where everything is exactly where it needs to be and you float through life because everything is in its place and in the appropriate place in terms of your priorities. The truth is that a teeter-totter on average is balanced, but it's doing this all the time. And I think that's what happens with work and life. You're managing work life more than you're balancing work and life. And in order to do that, you have to feel free to go with the ebb and flow of things, because there are going to be natural times that your professional life is going to have to tilt it a little bit more in that direction, and sometimes in the family. And it really is about choices on a day-to-day basis, but on any one day, your work and your life may not be in balance. What you've got to look at is over the long term, over years, what would that be? And so you make choices and you say, I'm not going to be that mom that shows up at school all the time with the cookies for the party to assist the teacher, but I know these kids are going to take 5 field trips a year, and I can be there for those, and I can help with those, and you carve out the spaces that you can do that fit. Same thing on the work side, and it's a little bit harder here because that's where you have to learn to say no to things that aren't urgent, because what's important and what's urgent are two different things. Urgent are the fires that pop up on a day-to-day or a week-to-week basis, and those are going to come and go, but there are certain things in the professional environment that are important that you can't take your eye off of, and they don't always have deadlines attached. And so being really clear about what's important in the workplace versus just urgent is a part of that equation as well. But the most important thing to me is being comfortable letting that balance tip back and forth as it needs to, given where your personal life is, what's going on at work, those kinds of things, and being comfortable managing that balance.
I think it's for me, it has always been very important that there is no disconnect between my private life and my professional life. It's all the same. Once an architect, always an architect, and that relates to clothing, cooking, traveling, ceremonies in life. And my wife and I, and then later with the kids, we were quite lucky that we had everything under one roof. We had the studio in the same house and so the kids could see how their father works, and to not have that disconnect was an important thing. And by the way, I don't have the time to make a clear cut at 5 o'clock and then say, from now on I'm private. So it's actually just merging.
You're aware that I've lost 2 wives to cancer, and I don't like death and mourning and all that sort of stuff. But when you get married, you expect to spend some time with the woman you've decided to live with. And so I think you get to the stage where you try to balance as much as you can a married life with a professional life. This marriage may be taking your wife to South Dakota to live in a tent while you're excavating burials. I mean, this is sharing. I mean, you're sharing all of these things. But you realize that you're just not an entity by yourself, that what you do impacts a lot of people, impacts your family. You have children, then you need to do some parenting. If you don't, you're gonna have problems. And you make it a family affair.
In dealing with the issue of failure, and what do you learn from failure? How do you fall forward from failure? I spent 39 years at the University of Tennessee in different roles, assistant to the president, up to president. And you're going to fail. You're going to have things you want to do that you cannot do. And I did a lot of fundraising, and you ask a lot of people for money, and they turn you down. And a mentor of mine once says, when you ask somebody for money and they turn you down, it's an invitation to go back with a better proposition. So I never looked at failure as failure, because if you get down about it, you get terrible, you should never be happy about failure. But I always found the best thing I could do with failure, if a legislature didn't pass a bill, or you didn't get the money that you wanted from a donor, or you had a dean or a vice president or a chancellor that went sour, and you had to deal with it. Those were disappointments, because if the people on my staff, I hired them, it was my failure. But so I had to go back and analyze, what did I do wrong? How can I do a better job? And how can I ensure that I don't make the same mistake twice? I've never felt that I failed in making a mistake or having a failure. I felt that I really failed if I repeated that same mistake time and time again.
I believe that when you're in leadership positions, every decision that's being made has multiple consequences in terms of stakeholder groups. And I'm in higher ed, so I think in terms of students, faculty, alums, maybe even the legislature, and how they're going to respond to what's going on. It can be very far-reaching in terms of who's going to be impacted by decisions. And my failing forward was several years ago, when I didn't stop and do the inventory of all of those stakeholder groups and how they were going to respond to a particular decision, and take the time, the pre-work, to build, to get them on board in terms of a decision. I'm one of those people that likes to fly at 30,000 feet. Big ideas, I dream big, and I am a doer. I like to get things done. And so what I have to realize for myself is I have to take the time to bring people along with me. And the failing forward was just not being conscious enough or attentive enough to a particular stakeholder group, when once I got ready to move forward with the decision, they put the brakes on in a way that really shut down the process for a while, and you have to go back and rebuild at that point. So I think the win for me in terms of failing forward and being able to not replicate that same mistake again is really about being very sensitively fine-tuned to all of the many people, both directly and indirectly, who are going to have some kind of consequence from that decision, and building them and their concerns into the process from the get-go?
I think it's integral to my philosophy that I don't believe that there is such thing as failure. I think there are bumps in life a couple of times every day. And I think it's more about being questioned and struggling and being dedicated and stay on track. I don't think that failure is something that needs to be considered. It's rather about struggling and taking everything as a test in life or tests in life, and so that it becomes a passion. Again, I take all the bumps as tests, and we can only get better if we stay on track and actually try it a second time. And it proves our standing, actually where we stand and what we stand up for. It questions our beliefs, and we actually have to get better at it. And well, we can spend an entire life of getting better and improving our actions. And yeah, not let loose. I guess that's a kind of message that I try to give to my students.
People have heard the story when I got cut, you know, my 6th grade year, and you know, I was heartbroken, and you know, I think maybe part of me thought that because I was her son, I might make it, you know, just solely on that, and I didn't work as hard as I could have.
I walk in the room and I said, "Tyler, what's wrong with you?" And he goes, "I got cut." Well, my first thought is, what coach in East Tennessee would cut my son? I mean, think about it. You know, put him at the end of the bench, but give him a uniform. And then I guess the coach came out in me, and I looked at Tyler and I said, had a basketball under each arm. He was crying so hard.
And she goes, "Well, do you think you worked hard enough?" And I knew I didn't. I said no, and she said, "Well, now you know what you got to do." And I was like, you know, I wanted her because I knew she knew everything about basketball.
And he goes, "Mom, will you help me?" I said, "Son, I will help you, but I will not start your engine. You must start your engine every day. Do you understand that?" And he goes, "Yes, ma'am."
So every day, you know, that I wanted her to help me, I would have to go to her. It wouldn't be her pushing me. You gotta be self-motivated, and that's another thing she taught me. It's really important.
A defining moment in his life. It changed him. It changed his focus. It changed his work ethic, his drive. I haven't had to motivate him since then, not at all. It's a pretty incredible story.
One of the failures I've had in my career was in the late 70s, I reckon. We had a Civil War soldier's grave disturbed in Middle Tennessee. It was Colonel Shy. The Shy family was a well-known Middle Tennessee family. That when the war came along, the family did what many of those families did. Some went to the Union, some went to the South. And William was a colonel in the Confederate Army, killed in the Battle of Nashville in 1864, just a few months before the end of the war. He was killed within about 10 miles of his home, taken back to his home, and buried in the family cemetery back of the house. As years go by, the Shy family moves. They moved to Texas now, and the house had been sold a number of times. And it had been sold to a physician, and his wife was going out checking on the remodeling, and she goes out between Christmas and New Year's and notes that one of the graves in the cemetery has been disturbed. So they call the sheriff. The sheriff looks at it. I was on the medical examiner staff at that time to deal with all these things, so I went over, and we looked down in this hole over Colonel Shy's grave, and here was a skeleton, a body essentially, that you could see red tissue on the femur. The body smelled terrible, and I thought, ooh, you know what you've got here? You've got somebody try you have a recent murder that's been placed over a cemetery grave to disguise it. And so we worked on it that day. I left the clothing with the TBI office and brought the skeleton back to Knoxville. By Monday, I started simmering the material to get rid of the soft tissue, because my area of expertise is skeletal remains. And you could smell its chemical smell. And I thought, ugh, I'll bet you this might be Colonel Shy. But Colonel Shy had soft tissue on him, so forth. It's interesting, you approach the world with the experiences that you've had. And a few years before this, I moved to German Lutheran Cemetery in Wartburg, which is a town about 60 miles from here. We got 19 graves out of a cemetery. You could have held all 19 people in both hands. I mean, you could say German Lutherans don't hold up very well, if you want to say that. But anyway, my frame of reference to people in the Civil War would be that, oh, hey, there wouldn't be anything there. However, this is where, a failure led to more research and a big change in what we do now. And that is that Colonel Shy was embalmed and placed in a cast iron coffin. So Colonel Shy, embalming gets into Nashville in 1858. So it had been in the Nashville 6 years before Colonel Shy was killed. There's nothing in the literature that really tells you this, although it appears that Colonel Shy was embalmed by his family physician. And this is what you would expect. In those days, the physicians were the ones that did embalming and so forth. And he was placed in a cast iron coffin, and literally he was kind of in suspended animation for 100 and some years. And had we not looked at that, and I wrote an article on this. I said, there are a lot of things we don't know about what we're dealing with, and there are a lot of things we don't know. So that challenges you to keep going.
To me, the most important aspect of leadership is always have as your first priority the welfare of the entity for which you work. That's where your passion must be. You don't put yourself first. You don't put your family first. You don't put your friends first. You put the University of Tennessee or your high school or your elementary school. That's first. Secondly, make sure you do that which is fair, decent, honest, and legal. Don't ever play games with ethics and integrity, because you may do it once, but the problem is all the people who work with you observe you're violating an ethical standard. And they may begin to feel, I can violate ethical standards if my leader violates ethical standards. So first, be loyal and look out for the welfare of the agency for which you work. Your university, your high school, your elementary school, whatever it is. And secondly, whatever you do, make sure it's fair, decent, ethical, and honest.
At the end of the day at work and at the end of life, it's all about relationships and investing what you need to build those relationships, whether that is in your personal life or whether that's in your professional life. And to me, when you are investing time in relationships, that's when you know you're spending your time well on either side of that. So I think that's really core, is are you building the relationships that are gonna sustain you, nurture you, get things done that you need to have happen, partner, collaborate, those kinds of things. It's all about building relationships.
Well, I guess it's simply the question, what am I doing this for? What drives me? What, more in terms of what contribution can I make to society? Not to my life and to my acknowledgments. It's of my reputation. It's what can I leave when I have to leave? What is my heritage? In family, in my family, or with my students or my colleagues, my clients. In my case, it's to give students a better idea of a higher meaning in life. To my clients, it's to give them an idea of a better life in better spaces. So that's where I have chosen my field to spend my lifetime. And I would hope that other people would do the same thing in their professions, whether they are educators or physicists or God knows what they have dedicated their life for. So being dedicated in that kind of central issue of contributing to society.
And I said, hey, Dad. He goes, did you win? And I said, no, sir, we lost by 1 point. And he goes, there was a long pause, and I thought, oh, I know it's going to be coaching. And he said, well, you just need to know one thing. You don't take donkeys to the Kentucky Derby. Do you hear me? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, all right, and hung up. You know, I thought that message that day spoke volumes to me, because you do win in life with great people and talented people and competitive people and people that have a passion for playing this game and playing it the right way.
I think to view yourself as being in a team, it's a team effort. You're not by yourself. You are dealing with people in all kinds of situations, not just academic, but you need to be, it needs to be a team effort as to how you treat all the people that you meet. I've never seen any different from me from anybody on campus. I stop, I talk to all the janitors, I talk to all the workmen. If they're digging holes out there in the ground, I ask them if you found any bones down there yet, and then we talk about skeletal remains and so forth. But I think that you need to think that hey, I have an opportunity to meet a lot of people, and those people are important no matter what position they're in, and you want to be kind and considerate of everybody.